Hello, everybody. This is Frank Norris from the Frank and Stan chat. This is chat number 26. So this is our half-year anniversary. So my good friend Stan. Hello, Stan.
Hi, Frank. We've not got a drink. Well, I've got a cup of tea. It doesn't really.
Well, I've had to ferry around the house trying to find a decent signal, and one where I don't look as though I'm sort of like, I don't know, under a spotlight or something. But anyway, this is the best I can do. So who would have thought 26 episodes?
That's amazing. I didn't think we'd get past 3. If I'm honest, I thought 3 was about our limit.
What, you mean we'd get found out after 3?
Yeah, and I've just spoken to somebody who says, "Oh yeah, I enjoy on a Saturday morning watching the two of you." Wow.
I did a podcast this morning for the MPQEL course, and the person that was interviewing me, Andy, said that what I want you to do when we do the podcast is I want you to get the same atmosphere that the Frank and Stan chats has. Really, we just chat. But actually, yeah, I think the way we've done it is actually, I think people either they do think, because it's a bit casual and it can sort of wash over you a little bit. It's not like you're going to be sort of asked questions about what did Stan say, what did he mean by that. Oh. So it is what it is. Anyway, yeah, we're on a Thursday afternoon. We normally do these on a Friday morning. Stan, you're with us today because tomorrow you might not be. Well, you will be with us, but your problem is not that serious. But
no, so I'm having some dental treatment tomorrow morning. So fingers crossed, it'll be. I won't be in agony all weekend, but I might be.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that. Good luck. I mean, we were due to be talking to Jennifer Webb tomorrow, this edition. So with the change of arrangements, we've asked Jennifer if she'll come and join us later, probably in the year or perhaps early next year. But so if you've joined us today thinking it was going to be Jennifer Webb, I'm really sorry, but you're stuck with Frank and Stan. Wow. Who we have chosen 26. I mean, we sit here sometimes thinking, "Ooh, what are we going to talk about?" Actually, there's just too many things to talk about. And actually, the last 26 weeks, we have not struggled at all to find something to talk about. And this week is no different.
No, definitely not.
Go on, Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I had a chat, and it was just a chat with a head teacher, and going off back to what we talked about last week, what's very clear is there's a lot of head teachers running purely on adrenaline now to get through to Friday. And one, that's not good for their mental health, but also I think there's quite a connection with physical health if you are running on adrenaline when the adrenaline runs out.
Yes.
Or when you get I am genuinely concerned about how we help school leaders over this next 2 weeks and then beyond, because I think coming back to it with all the same problems with no real solutions yet is going to be very difficult in terms of people's resilience through that.
I agree. I think that there's also the issue around how it's affecting them and the relationships they have at home, with their partners and things like that. There is some potential collateral damage here, but actually you might have got through your day okay. But actually there's more to life than just your working life and the relationships you have, whoever it is you're with, if you are with somebody, that really is important, that there's time for them, isn't there, over the next week or so.
Yeah, and the same goes for all the staff in school as well. I'm not saying, but I think, some of the things that we chatted about with the head teacher were things like, not knowing in a morning when you get in. Everybody always says that about being ahead. You never know what's going to happen. But now it doesn't know which staff will be in, which children, if he'll get a phone call first thing in the morning to say he's got to send a class home or a year group home. And he said that that's constant. There's no break to it.
I think, what's caught my eye is probably going to be the basis of what we're going to talk about today, isn't it, really? I think yesterday we witnessed a mean, a decision made by the government not to fund free school meals for vulnerable children during this half term, the October half term, Christmas, and the February half term. And I think and I'm not being political, party political here, I'm being political but not venturing on either side, because I think there's some really awful stuff. That a lack of civility is probably the phrase, or the word that I use, on both sides of Parliament. Whether or not it's appropriate to use a term like nationalising children, or whether it's actually appropriate to use the word scum or whatever, is really not what I expect to see. Now I know that it's meant to be, it's a challenge and whatever. It's not for the faint-hearted. Don't get me wrong. But actually, as I do this broadcast now, I look at two young women from the local school walking past, talking to each other, getting on with life, trying to work their way through. It's just awful what I witnessed.
Should we give disadvantaged children some access to food, or how can that be partisan? How can it divide into two tribes? Something as morally important as that. I don't understand where we've got to. That's my worry, because if there's an acceptance, and I think there was, because there were lots of people saying yes, but in the next year we'll review it and we'll do something about it, and it needs a bigger picture than now. None of that feeds those children this half term, and I just can't believe we can discuss poor families in food poverty not being supported properly and make that party political. I don't understand that.
I just feel as though, the reason why I left banking to join teaching was because I felt as though I could make a difference to some kids who didn't have the opportunities I had, and my upbringing was quite a simple one. It was most of my parents were manual labourers, and my mum had 3 or 4 jobs, I remember, and my dad used to work on the Ford's line. But I got into teaching because I did want to sort of make life better for the children. And it felt yesterday as if the children were not part of the solution. It was as if they were being blamed for having parents who were feckless or would waste it. I was really quite shocked. This is the civility, the lack of civility. But in defence, somebody tweeted, an MP, that actually there is evidence of parents using the free school meal vouchers that were issued before for booze and cigarettes and whatever. Now I know that the co-op issued vouchers, not part of the EMRED scheme. And there was an attempt by some parents to do that, but the voucher scheme that was introduced would not allow those vouchers to be used against alcohol and cigarettes. It really does worry me. And if parents are doing that, then isn't that the reason why it's so important that we do fund children a decent lunch in some shape or form during the half term? Actually, parents are using the money for the things that it's not meant to be used for, but those are the most I suspect they're the most vulnerable children.
Yeah, but again, Frank,
we've forgotten about it all.
We're talking with things like that about a very, very tiny minority that yes exist, but actually don't exist in a percentage that you could even show across all parents who access free school meals. And it's the typical example of we show one person, one family, or we refer to something that may or may not be happening, and that becomes a reason to not support everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
And I run out of words, and especially when I see people who are in the education department voting against it.
I have deep respect for the 5 Tory MPs who voted, with the Labour motion, and in a way that's not because they voted for Labour, but actually, if I was in their position, I'm sitting as a Tory MP, it would be a very difficult decision, but actually one where you feel as though, well, could I really look into the eyes of a child who's on preschool meals when I go back to my constituency next week. And
so,
think to myself, how many children have I prevented from having a decent meal today, in the constituency that I'm to be serving? So it is really deep.
When I finished eating my subsidised meal in the House of Commons, and then claimed my expenses for travelling there and back.
Yes, yeah, it's difficult to defend at all, isn't it? And I think that.
I think there's a defence, Frank, and I think the defence was this needs wider thinking. We need, my view would be we need to move school meals into social care rather than education. But in the interim, let's just pay for these meals, and then we've not got children going hungry. So I listened to some, and I listened to people say, yes, this is a bigger problem, and therefore I can't support it. No, it's a bigger problem, so do something immediate, and then start working on the bigger problem.
Well, I mean, I am, if the government, and I in a way that the government has been of a certain colour in terms of its, a Tory government for a relatively long period of time, actually, there has been time to sort this out. This is not just an issue related to COVID, is it?
Did you hear the MP
brought this to a head?
Did you hear the MP who said when Marcus Rashford was poor, it was under a Labour government?
Yes.
Actually, when he was 12, he was under a Conservative government. So, but fancy reducing to that one. No, it was worse when you were in. Well, okay, this is about fixing it.
Yeah.
And I run out of things to say, to be honest.
I mean, all credit to the co-op stepping up to support those 25 schools. I'm a trustee of a trust in East Manchester to provide free school meals to 3 large secondaries and 1 large primary. To provide free school meals for next week, it would cost £16,000. So I'm hoping there's a discussion tonight. That trust has an endowment, so we're considering using the interest from that endowment to fund free school meals. And actually, why are we doing that? Because actually, we know that the impact of that of children next week of having no proper meal would be detrimental to their lives, and to actually asking them to learn, as they are going to be doing next week with a programme, actually not feeding them. Actually we're going to have a situation where some of those families will have a laptop that's been provided by the DfE, but no food. So, it really is, quite difficult to get your head around this. But we're not talking about massive amounts. It's not as if this is the 6-week holiday, is it?
No.
It was just a case of saying, well, we'll do it. We'll do it for this one. But we're giving notice that we can't do it over the Christmas period. Perhaps it was, we don't want to do it now, because if we do it now, we will have to do it over the Christmas period, because the hearts will be all so tight.
That frustrating bit of hearing people at the dispatch box saying things that actually you could challenge very easily. To say, well, we did it all through the summer and we know the importance of it, blah, 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 blah. So why have you stopped?
Yes,
and there was nobody to make those questions, and to really turn the argument inside out. And I've noticed the DfE put something on Twitter about how much they already support children who have free school meals, and the 3 things they've highlighted were free school meals, holiday and breakfast clubs, none of which will be available next week.
No.
And I think look, yesterday when the debate was on, there should have been an overarching question that said, but will this feed the children next week? And if at the end of every MP's sort of chance to debate and put their point of view, if that question could be asked, in most of the cases the answers would have been no.
Yeah, what I mean, in effect, we're having such a large majority for the Conservative government means that actually whipping them is actually very easy, isn't it? Because a lot of people would say, well, I probably would vote against it, but what's the point? We're going to need, was it 40 odd of them to join, to cross the to the other side. So actually, I think that there may well be some who had some sympathy with the position that was being made, but felt it was pointless. You know, I may as well just line up with the others and be the group as opposed to the individual.
Yeah, but conscious, your moral fibre should surely say that's almost irrelevant. Whether we win or lose, at some point in the future, somebody can look through my voting record and say, yes, when I had the chance to vote for making sure disadvantaged families had food over a difficult half term, I voted against it.
I know. I have to say, I find it very difficult to understand. Like the Greater Manchester settlement figure, which actually was £5 million, wasn't it? Yeah. The difference between doing the deal and not. And actually, you think, well, £5 million. And bearing in mind how many millions of people there are living in Manchester, for £5 million, it felt as though it in effect, Stan, it's our money. It's, you know, we view it as the government's money, but it's our money. Thinking, actually, that's all it's going to take. Just do it, you know, because actually that's the matter resolved. The fact that you have to go back and give Lancashire another 5 million or Liverpool another 5 million, that's really probably the right thing to do. But in effect, it just feels as though there is a sort of, it's more important to make the point and to make a stand over something. And it just,
there are so many holes in the argument. There's so many holes in the argument. You know, yesterday or the day before, it was we had to be fair, we had to offer the same to everyone. So why did you start by offering less and then moving up?
Yeah.
If it has to be fair, your first offer should have been your first and final offer, which it clearly wasn't. So nobody's challenging them over that. Nobody's saying to Jenrick when he says, no, we moved up and we offered an extra money. Well, how were you able to offer extra money when you said it's got to be fair to everybody?
Yes.
Those arguments don't stand up together, and yet nobody, for some reason, is nailing people on that. And I do fully understand that, you know, we've got to cap it at a level that we can afford when the rest of the country go in. But then the Chancellor today talks about a new package of support, which would have solved that problem 3 days ago.
I know.
So, did you know that 3 days ago and used it to score political points, or have you just made it up over the last 3 days? You can't have both answers. You've got to have one or the other.
Yeah.
Right, rant over.
Well, it feels a long way away from education, but it isn't, is it? Because
no,
it's really interesting. It's interesting. I've been contacted quite a bit recently because of my role as the independent chair of the Blackpool Education Improvement Board. And what's interested people is the fact that Diane Booth, the director in Blackpool, has established what in effect is a children and families board. So the education board feeds into that. And it takes you back to the Department for Children and Families, you know, before it became the Department for Education. And in a way, I think that COVID has highlighted the need for services to be truly integrated and for there to be, you know, cohesion between those services. And that this idea that it can be the schools, you know, to drive the improvement, you know, that's the vehicle for levelling up, that's the vehicle for, you know, giving up. Yes, it is a vehicle, it's an important vehicle. But COVID has highlighted this is not the only vehicle. I do feel as though, I say it broadly, but those in education who've promoted this idea about it's down to the schools, it's down to the schools, that is coming back to bite some schools quite heavily now because COVID has highlighted it isn't. That is not enough. And
let's think who changed it.
Who that man was.
Yeah.
But actually, I think the sense of, I think and there's still that rhetoric spinning around the place, you know, that you know, just give it to the schools, you know, I think the risk of giving it to schools is that has forced some small number to look at the accountability framework and to say, well, how can we get what appears to be the best outcome in that framework, and not consider what the impact is on everybody else in that community, in that town, in that village, in that city. I think that what we need is a quick readjustment so that we don't lose the opportunity this presents. Because if it is just about going back to Ofsted, inspecting individual schools, and help us, because actually I think the COVID thing has proved that schools are about education, but they are about communities and the way that they connect with each other. So if we have Ofsted coming back inspecting school without consideration of, well, how does this fit into the bigger picture? I think we will have missed this great opportunity now to actually just recalibrate what it is, how we value schools and what we view to be important for schools.
Yeah, well, Frank, going back to just after I'd inspected, when I was ahead, I couldn't get around the idea that I was being judged in a middle-class school in the same framework exactly as the school I'd worked in previously, which was inner city Salford. And the judgments were going to be based on the same things, and yet the context of the two schools were miles apart. I know I've used this before, but we've talked about the environment and how you make the environment good. Let's say the external environment. When I was in Salford, it was, is there any burnt out cars on the playground? Are there any needles that need cleaning up first? When I was in Lancashire, it was, has somebody planted the daffodils in the right place?
Yeah.
Very, very different context, and yet the same weight based upon those judgments. And it is unfair. I know that the argument is, oh, you're lowering the standards for those schools in challenging, but you're not, because at the moment we're not recognising the challenges.
No, I think that's the issue, isn't it? That at the end of the day, we're drawing on. It's not about Ofsted per se, but it's actually what are we? How are parents? How is the community? How is government in all its guises? How is it judging the effectiveness of schools? And I think COVID has highlighted it being far too narrow, and actually given sufficient weight to the bits that schools should be providing. Here, nobody gives two hoots about whether or not, to be honest, key stage 1 assessments are done. This is about, can we get through this to a point where there's a vaccine? If we think that things are going to be the same, I think we've missed it. The profession deserves what it gets, really, at the end of the day. If it can't make a stand now with the communities it serves and gets that voice heard, this is the best opportunity they've ever had.
Yeah, well, I think
even the whole education's keep the show on the road, together with health. It's those two things that are keeping the economy moving.
Yeah, well, I think it's root and branch we need to do, and we need to start. I mean, it's not because there's a book behind me called "Start with Why" by coincidence, but we've got to actually start to ask those questions. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? And if there's not a good reason, stop. Not if there's not a good reason to stop, carry on, because that's what normally happens. If we can't make the case for stopping testing phonics this term, then we'll do it. But actually, we should be asking, why are we doing? What are we doing it for?
Yes.
And the same with exams at the end of this year. The same with a lot of the things. Ofsted, the way we challenge schools. Let's start again by asking, why are we doing it? I know that people sort of, Ofsted have said in the past, we do it so that parents can know the quality of the schools. When Ofsted first came out, I remember parents used to be interested in their school's Ofsted report. I'm not sure it has the same impact anymore. I'm not sure. I don't remember in all my time parents moving their children away in great hordes because some inspector had said it was unsatisfactory or requires improvement or requires special measures. Most cases in the schools that I was involved with, the parents' view was the inspectors have got it wrong.
Wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really good school.
Yeah. It's funny though. I've got to be careful of the time here, but I was on a Zoom call with colleagues, and we were talking to a group of head teachers. It was a conference type thing where I was talking, and actually a colleague said, well, you know, our school was judged as requires improvement, but actually I don't think it was right. And I said, you're probably right, it might not have been right. And actually he felt as though well, how could that be, you know, because he was a relatively young, inexperienced head teacher. And actually I think what we have gained, Stan, is just that bit of wisdom or bit of knowledge, experience that actually says, you know, chances are there's a fair chance it might not be right. And if we got to that position, actually, and the power of that judgment, you know, on him was significant, you know, and this is a man at relatively early in his career, saddled with that sort of level of accountability. It's not a good place to be in.
No, and well, it goes back to all my thing on testing, where statistically none of it stands up on a group of 30 in a one form entry primary, 30 children. But statistically, those figures don't add up.
Yeah,
you can't actually use them to make the arguments that are used. I can remember right at the beginning of all this, Frank, when people said, so here's your profile for your school, this is your percentage. It was levels in those days for
yes.
me. In this year you got so many level 4s, what will you get the year after? And I can remember saying, it's a different cohort. It's not something that rises like this. It's a different cohort, so it may well be. I can probably tell you what I'll get, but it won't be related to the previous cohort or the next cohort. It'll be that.
Well, I'll finish on this because I think in the next couple of weeks there's this Fairer School Index coming out, basically looking at secondary schools using Dr. George Lecky's algorithm and his research.
All right.
And so
I wouldn't use the word algorithm.
No, well, I said that as well, actually, when we were talking about it. But basically, you know, you're looking at about 14 or 15 different sort of contextual issues that impact on outcomes. And in it, we were talking about how we might try and sort of let the Department for Education know about it. So we actually had a discussion about that with them this week. And it was really interesting how there was a lack of willingness to really go for it, because it was slightly undermining what currently exists. And I found that really quite troubling, you know, that actually we are so set in our ways, in the way things are done, you know, and whether that's GCSEs, we're doing them, this is the way, we've got early terms, this is the way we're going to do it, that actually no one's stepping back saying, well, hang on a minute, could we do this a slightly different way and still achieve what we all want?
In my view, why are we doing it? If we need to do it, can we do it in a better way?
Agreed.
There's so much we could do in a better way, and things like, you know, if schools do get to doing GCSE exams at the end of this year, how much better could we have been if we were now doing ongoing moderated assessments for year 11?
Well, one thing that I'll finish on this now, Lecky, in the discussions we had, he said, because there are 3,300 or so secondary schools in the country, and he said, it's not a very big cohort, you know. Statistically, that's not a very reliable number. You know what I mean? In terms of his research is taking account, trying to take account of that. But actually, when you think, hang on a minute, haven't we all just fallen for that hook, line, and sinker? As if to say, well, give us 10 schools. Well, you know, we'll compare you against, what, compare you against 10? I mean, if Dr. Lecky is saying 3,300 is not a very big sample, it makes you wonder just, you know, what we've done. You know, what have we created? Anyway.
It's cheered everybody up.
It has. Yeah, probably I should have ended up on a more positive note. But anyway, I hope your tooth treatment tomorrow goes well, Stan. And
yeah, so do I.
And we're back next Friday. And we're joined by a woman called Jo Morphy, and Jo runs a not-for-profit organisation which is about getting girls into the digital world. And she's an amazing woman, and I'm looking forward to chatting to her. Anyway, so we'll see you all next week. So cheerio, Stan. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Bye.